Hey, welcome to the family table. I am so glad you came to join us. It's going to look a little different today. Today is a panel of some of the most incredible people from our city sharing about parenting. So we brought them, we've got 2 counselors, a pediatrician, long history of law enforcement, and we look forward to having dialogue with them. So I'd love for you to introduce yourselves and just tell us a little about who you are. Brandon, do you want to get us started?
Sure. My name is Brandon Kaopuiki. I'm married for 22 years, adoptive father of 5 kids, now ages 16 to 23. And I've spent most of my adult life working in law enforcement, specializing in child abuse and exploitation investigations, but more recently working for an international nonprofit organization focusing on child exploitation issues overseas.
Oh, thank you for being here. Yeah.
I'm Suzanne Bailey. My husband and I are college sweethearts. We've been married for 15 years. And we have 3 kids, so we have a 3, 5, and 7-year-old. Our path to having kids was a little more complicated, and we had some assistance to do so that's been part of our journey. And I'm a pediatrician here in town, so I work at Salem Pediatric Clinic, where I've been for about almost 7 years now. And so certainly I'll be sort of coming to the table with just a little bit more of the sort of health and medical perspective, also certainly in the thick of parenting little children and all the glory and others that adds to the table.
So I'm Cindy Fegles, and I will be celebrating my 30th wedding anniversary on Tuesday, which is hard to imagine. So yes, made it to year 30. I have a 26-year-old son, and then I have a 23-year-old daughter who just got married a month ago. So I am now a mother-in-law. So now I feel like I have 3 kids, which is really fun. So by profession, I'm a marriage and family therapist, specializing in really trauma, but working with individuals and adolescents and marriages and couples and families. And I also am certified in drug and alcohol counseling, which has been really helpful for that dynamic in so many families and what they experience.
And I'm Lisa Hall, and I have been married also for almost 30 years. It'll be 30 in December. Wow. We have a 25-year-old and 23-year-old sons. And let's see, I work as a licensed professional counselor, and Cindy and I are actually in the same office building. Nice. Yes, it's nice. I also see folks, my primary specialty is trauma, and then I also do a whole variety of other things, and kind of adults, primarily 18 to people in their 70s, and just love the work, love the variety, love kind of helping show them some hope, and healing is just a huge privilege.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Thanks all of you guys for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join in this mission. We're just going to jump in. The first question I want to ask is, so do any of you have a family mission statement or maybe a North Star that you use to communicate your values in your family?
Several years ago, our family did develop a family mission statement, and it was guided in part by the missions director at our church.
Okay.
As our family was actually preparing, we felt like God was calling us to prepare for an overseas mission.
Okay.
And so developing a family mission statement, which is not articulated in an easily recitable sentence format.
Yeah.
At the time, what it is an acrostic using the word adopted as kind of the main concept of it. But it included aspects of obedience and caring for other children, and those types of things that we really felt like God had put on our lives and had done to help bring our family together. And then we were able to use that as a matrix against which we would compare opportunities that might come up, particularly in overseas missions. Is this a thing that fits with what we feel like God has called our family to be about? And so, again, it's not something I can recite to you. We have it kind of printed out, and there's several phrases that are part of it. But we certainly found that to be a really useful tool to guide those discussions, but also just a great exercise to go through with the kids at that time.
Yeah.
That was 9 years ago now, and we did end up eventually going overseas for 3 years. And when we evaluated that opportunity, it was a perfect fit.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for for us when our kids were little, we did something similar. We didn't call it a mission statement. We just called it, what do we want to be known for?
Yeah.
So it was the Fegles will, our family, and we came up with be kind, love God, don't lie, work hard, right? And that was kind of like on the fridge, for 15 years, and what we kind of, is that how you're living your life? Is this your best life? And we kind of related it to that, but that was what we did, and I think it worked out. I think they love God and they're kind people.
They work hard.
They work hard. I think they work hard. I suppose I know they do. So at least I think it went well.
Yeah.
This question actually made me think that I think we need to make a mission statement in our family.
So we
what's
don't
your next
actually
step?
have one.
Exactly.
Like,
but my husband and I have certainly, we were married for a long time before we had children, and so I think, we've always felt sort of called externally and just see the many, many blessings in our lives in terms of how we were brought up and our families, our extended families, and so we've sort of always felt that a part of ours was just to love people.
Yeah.
And I have the most extroverted children you've probably ever met. They're far more extroverted than, frankly, I am, which is sometimes difficult. And so, no, this actually made me excited to say that we really need to sit down. They're now old enough that we can talk about this a little bit more. And I have these kind of ideas, but actually getting down and hashing it out and creating something that we put up, I think is going to be really exciting to do for that next stage.
I love that. So.
And then how do you use that to become the umbrella that you're putting things under?
Yes.
I feel like with all the COVID stuff, people have talked about how our schedules have all changed.
Yes.
And one of the things I've said is that, or I've seen people talk about, is like, cut out the stuff that's not important. And I'm like, who are all you people that you've been doing stuff that's not important? I feel like it's all important, and yet it's too much.
Totally.
And it would be delightful to have a framework that we could assess things, because everything's important on some level, but having a framework that you put it through, and that's, I think, what a true mission statement becomes. Everything's valuable, but what fits within our mission statement, who we are, who we're called to be, how our family is made, and that looks so different for all of us.
Yes.
Oh, I was going to say, we didn't have a mission statement, but we definitely talked about values, and we chose to be, speaking of busy schedules, involved in things and to have our children involved in things where we were just kind of having regular discussions about what was important to us, about scripture, just Bible studies, and having them plugged in at our church. And we did, when they were little, Bible quizzing, which I don't know how we did, again, just this, like,
fit it in,
I don't know how we fit it in.
Yeah.
I don't know how we did it.
Yeah.
And then sports became important to both my boys when we were, as they were getting older in high school. And so being supportive of that and helping them, think through how to love on the guys on their teams and kind of start to live out some of these principles they'd been learning. That's it. So it was much less formalized in our family.
Totally.
But wow, do I see and hear the value of really articulating that and posting it somewhere, and having it help you decide what to say no to.
Yeah.
As well as yes.
Exactly. So now I kind of want to move into some of our topics. One of our topics we've been discussing is personal health. So I'm going to direct this to Dr. Bailey, and then you guys can all weigh in. But what would you say, how can kids stay healthy physically, emotionally, spiritually, and then how can we as parents model those things? And if you just want to take one, that's fine, or if you want to take them as an umbrella, go for it. Yeah.
When you talk about health, I think there's some very sort of, we probably all know it, but are we thinking about it daily principles?
Yeah.
I tend to tell kids in well child checks all the time, like, you have to sleep. If you're not sleeping well, the whole world is a worse place. And we all know that.
Yeah.
We're parents.
Yeah.
We've all parented.
Yes.
We know how that feels. Sleep, exercise, what you're eating, of course. There's, of course, things like not touching your face and washing your hands, which is so much more in our face right now to be thoughtful about. In your face, pun intended. And then I think just sort of emotional health, so paying attention to your emotions. I think those are very general principles. How does that actually play out? Mindfulness is so important, and to be thoughtful about it and to analyze, because we all know with children, there are some children that are naturally on the go all the time, and you don't really have to encourage them to exercise. There are those children that are much more intellectually gifted or just quiet, and the endeavors that they really enjoy are sort of sitting and not necessarily moving. And so those kids, you have to focus on making sure exercise is a part of their day. So I think it's really taking in analyzing your individual tendencies as a person, collectively in a partnership, as a marriage, and then as a family, and each of your individual children to figure out who they are. I just think the most successful parents are the ones who really think about the strengths and weaknesses of their individual children and then parent for that. So I don't know if that answers the question fully.
I want to ask
but-
very specifically. So,
Yeah.
like, how much sleep does a toddler need? Like 5 hours?
Yeah.
I mean,
No, that's what we get as parents.
Okay, exactly. Oh, that's
Yeah, no, I mean, so the American Academy of Pediatrics has a website called healthychildren.org.
Okay.
And I say that because you're not going to remember the specific numbers
Totally,
that I say.
totally.
And so that's a great reference point, and you can look up all of those logistics.
Okay.
I will also tell you that science, medicine, professionals as we all are, can tell you sort of general things that fit for most people, but they're never gonna be 100%. There are those children who really need a lot more sleep and those children who need a lot less sleep. So again, I would go back to looking at them.
Yeah.
What amount of sleep are they getting and how is their behavior? We all know what our children are like when they're sleep deprived.
Yeah.
If you see that being a chronic theme, then you need to work and make it a priority to get them more sleep. Kind of fitting in that mission statement, then that tells you what to say yes and no to based on what your individual family needs.
Yeah.
And especially big emotions right now in a pandemic.
That we all have.
And we
Yes,
all have it. We have
yes.
it as adults and we have it as kids. But I think first we have to practice that ourselves, being aware of our emotions, kind of drilling down and saying, what's this about? I'm feeling kind of frustrated with the kids today. Oh, okay. I only got 5 hours of sleep last night.
Yeah,
So rather than erring on the side of discipline the kids, maybe mommy needs a timeout. And and I think too, just teaching kids how to feel comfortable with all of their emotions. You know, I grew up in a generation where it was, you stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about, you know?
Yes,
and that's
yes.
how, and our parents were doing the best they could. That's
Yeah.
what they'd been given too.
Yeah.
But now what we're learning is we need to be just attuned to our kids' emotions and accept them and say, wow, you're really angry about that. You know, let's take a minute and breathe together.
Okay.
And let's, okay, now that we're feeling calmer, are you feeling calmer? I'm feeling calmer. You know, a lot of modeling and just normalizing.
Yeah.
The
Big
self-awareness piece lets us then, I mean, you talked about how do we as parents sort of model that. And
Yeah.
part of it is needing to be self-aware and then changing our actions to be in line with that. I just echo exactly what you've said. I realize that my good days with my kids at home versus my bad days with my kids at home really has very little to do with my children. If you externally look at their behavior, they're about the same on those good or bad days. The good or bad days are how I'm doing. And I mean, something I've learned is that I gotta get up before them. I don't wake up well. And if I wait till they're awake and then I'm waking up too, we just start off the day on a bad foot. So, yeah, I think those little things of learning those little things about yourself that can just change an entire atmosphere.
Yeah.
I love that, and kind of piggybacking off that with the emotional health as well, and validating feelings. It is so important. I was just working with a couple today that they have no idea how to validate each other's feelings. But again, it was like what you were saying about the generation. They're like around our age, and have
So really
children
young.
in those really young in that age group, but they don't even know how to validate each other's feelings. And so they don't ever feel really emotionally connected. And I think for the emotional health of our kids, to be able to do what you just said, to clue into, you know, what are you feeling? And, you know, let's talk about that. Instead of like, yeah, exactly, like, please stop, just stop what you're doing and go away.
Yeah, telling them their feelings make sense. That makes sense to me. I know, I feel that way sometimes, just the empathy and validation.
The empathy.
I agree.
And
So important.
empathy is so important. It's so much different than sympathizing. Sympathizing is, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Let's move on with our day. But empathy is really like, okay, I'm gonna sit in the suck of this with you. I'm gonna enter into what you're going through. I may not ever understand it. I may not agree with all that's going on with you, but I can sit and try to get you.
Yeah.
So
I want to pop over to marriages a little bit, and I'm going to direct this to you, Lisa, and then you guys can fill in. But how are marriages struggling during this pandemic, and what are the so maybe the challenges, and then what are some maybe blessings? What are some good things that are coming out of it? So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think anytime stress enters our life, it just magnifies things, right? That were already maybe there in smaller ways, but now all of a sudden it's all this togetherness. It just makes our relational patterns really obvious. If they weren't obvious before, they're very obvious now. And a lot of us are sharing space that we haven't had to share before. And so I think I think people are struggling with just giving each other space, giving each other quiet, finding creative ways to communicate, and it really is giving us an opportunity on the upside to really work on some of those skills that we've kind of maybe gotten rusty on because we've been working in different locations all day long, 12 hours a day, and we only have to figure out how to communicate a few hours each evening, you know? And so it's a whole, it really is an opportunity. That does not make it easy because
totally,
right? We just can't be working, working on stuff all the time. But capturing those little moments and opportunities to say, oh, I noticed we were kind of barking at each other today. Like, I'm sorry for my part in that. What would help? And being curious with each other in the evenings or those whatever times those are. Having regular check-in times with each other, I think, is really important. For a lot of couples, that's after the kids go to bed, you have a few minutes together to just check in and even like simple habits like, well, what went well today? What were you proud of today? Or what kind of made your day? If you haven't already talked about it, maybe around the dinner table, bedtime's a good time to do that. And then, is there anything I can pray for you about? Anything you're worried about? And even checking in on, what does tomorrow look like? How can we support each other with the things we have happening tomorrow? Sometimes we get in the trenches, it feels like our spouse is the enemy. And
totally.
And instead it's sort of like, how do we get the problems in front of and the challenges in front of us, and you and I, we're in this together, we're on the same side of the problem, we're gonna attack it together. And with a lot of love and patience and grace, as much as we can muster. And that's not to say any of us are gonna do that perfectly, but recognizing that's really important right now, to just give each other extra grace, extra patience, extra understanding.
No, that's great.
I love the concept of a check-in time. I was just reading about a family that was going through a health crisis with one of their children, and one thing that the mom and dad, the husband and wife, did was to say that at 7:30 every night they were gonna have a moment in their backyard together, and they would spend 30 minutes together. And I just thought, like, in the midst of COVID, at least in my house, and my husband and I have just been in straight task mode for 4 months, right? Where are our children going next year? What are we doing with school? We both run businesses, and there's a lot of overlay there. And so to just have that designated time, there was a season in our life, in our marriage, where we went to see a counselor. Not only was the counselor lovely, it was actually just the dedicated time to like connect and talk and to work on ourselves was life-altering, right? And I thought, gosh, we need that now. We all need that time now that we like, that is sacred and is protected, and that we always say yes to and make time for. I think even going back to the health question, somebody said to me not that long ago that like, you can't find the time, you have to make the time. And I think that was, again, just one of those light bulb like moments in my own world where I was like, that's exactly it. I've been waiting to find the time, and magically I've never found it because it doesn't exist, but you can make the time, so.
I think the theme of communication, but also self-awareness and modeling is something we're probably going to be talking about a lot today with all these topics. So I do think that there's a sense of urgency that if there are families that are already struggling with this and have been pushing it off, thinking maybe this is going to lift next week or next month, we got to bear down and work on these issues now, because it's very possible that things might get more difficult.
And that, again, is actually maybe the blessing of all of this. Like you said, it highlights issues that are already there that we've been able to more easily ignore when that's not necessarily healthy to do. So maybe that is the blessing, that the urgency is like now, the time is now.
I want to jump in, Cindy, to anxiety and depression. Let's just kind of throw that on the table, and let's just, how are kids struggling with that, maybe during this pandemic, or just maybe in general? Like, what's kind of the lay of the land right now?
So what I think, kids were all, I'm going to be real, right? Kids were struggling so much before COVID ever came on board, right? In working with adolescents, they're really struggling. There's so much that's coming at them. There's so much they're dealing with, social media, all the stuff that I know we'll be talking about as we go along, all those things. And so depression and anxiety have become a real issue for families with their kids. I think what's so difficult, though, with particularly adolescents and kids, is that it looks different for them than it does for adults. And so if you have a child that walks out the door seemingly happy, right, you as a parent are thinking, they're fine, they're good. right? But what we don't know is, what we don't understand really is that depression in adolescence is more about what they're covering up. And I think even with adults, we have this idea that severe depression looks like not ever getting out of bed, excessive sadness. And my experience has been that really it's not sleeping is more more the issue, and it's people are functioning, but they're severely depressed. And so when we see our kids, we go, oh, they must be fine. They're acting happy. I hear her laughing with her girlfriends, or he's out playing baseball. And so we don't clue into those things that we should be looking for. And so with adolescents, really, it's more about what they're not saying than what they're saying. But is there, an increase in irritability in your child? Mm-hmm. Are they isolating more, which during a pandemic, oh my goodness, right? Of course they're isolating. We've told them to isolate. So there's things look like that, but there's also those little laughing, ha ha ha, I think I'll just go jump off a building. And, and we just kind of dismiss that as, oh, joke, ha ha. But instead, I think as parents, we need to step back and kind of maybe later privately kind of go, when you said, jumping off a building, I just need to check in and go, was that really kind of a joke, or are you kind of struggling with some thoughts about some stuff, and address it? And they may go like, oh my gosh, Mom, I'm fine, right? Yeah. Or they may burst out in tears and talk about how much they're struggling. So with those are some things to look for. How are things going with their relationships with their peers? Do are they withdrawing from their peers? Even checking in, with your kids who have had friends who have struggled with suicidal ideation or a suicide. The guilt that adolescents experience when they have a friend who has attempted suicide, and we've had several over the last couple of years in Salem-Kaiser. I've had those kids where the guilt they experience because they weren't awake at 2 a.m. when they got a text from a friend that said, I'm struggling. And so we have a lot of kids are even in counseling because of having a friend who's experienced suicidal ideation or attempted it and succeeded. And so much grief and so much loss around that. But then we've got COVID, which has taken so much away. And I think that's something that I don't feel gets talked about enough for kids, for elementary, middle school, high schoolers. So much loss, right? And we kind of went, well, it's the spring, we're all going to get through this, we're going to, you'll get everything back in the fall, and they're getting nothing back in the fall. It's just all the activities, the sports, the band, the choir, it's not coming back this fall. And so I think as parents, we need to really clue into, again, the feelings, right, around what we're seeing. Are there behavior changes? Checking in, what's it like for you not to be able to, play football? What's it like for you not to be able to, have Friday night and go play in the band? For whatever activities your kids, engage with. But there's a lot of loss, and with loss, there's grief. And so it's addressing grief. Yeah. And how do we help our kids navigate it? And if we're not navigating it well, then we need to get help so that we can help our kids.
Yeah. So I have maybe a little specific for Dr. Bailey. So have you seen anxiety in a very simple clue? And I think about this because we had just a kind of a well-child checkup with one of our kids, and somehow sleep came up, and the pediatrician said, oh, actually, and I can't even remember the age, but he said, at this age, that is the start. The sleep is actually the start for us to recognize anxiety. And they were pretty young.
I was going to say, so we thank goodness, are not seeing sick visits right now. So most children are just not sick, which is delightful. Mental health issues are rampant.
Okay.
They're in probably 3/4 of what I do every day. I was going to say in older children, but also certainly in younger children, oftentimes they don't have even the verbs of emotions. They don't have the language of emotions to say things like, I feel depressed. Plus, that's become such a catchphrase that who knows what that means anymore. Depressed is because like I have a big test coming up and I'm depressed about it. What we see in little kids a lot is the somatic manifestation. So lots of headaches, tummy aches, sleeping difficulties, those sorts of things. And so just being on guard to that, being aware of that, and looking at where that could also be coming from. I mean, I think I'm relatively self-aware. I certainly have an educational background, and I was talking to my sister about how I was doing, and she's like, Suzanne, you get that's anxiety, right? I was just telling her that I just feel depleted. I've just had things in life, and at the end of the day, I was like, I feel like a computer with my fan always running, you know, and I'm just tired. And she's like, you get that's anxiety, right? And I was like, good point. Again, communication, talking to the people that you love, that you trust, that have insight into your life, whether that's professional or social, I think is important. And being, I just loved what you said, that like anxiety and depression don't always present as I'm anxious and I'm depressed. So you really have to be looking like, gosh, what is that behavior? What's the underlying reason for it? And looking at that.
Yeah, I had an adolescent who had a panic attack and she blamed it on wearing a mask. And, you know, that's something as a parent, you know, or myself as a therapist would clue into, like, well, let's talk a little bit more about what was going on that day.
What's going on?
What was, you know, instead of just, oh, it was a mask issue. And maybe she did, but I don't think it was the mask. I think it was
that might have been the trigger for the other stuff that was already there.
Right. But that could be something where a parent would just come, you know, oh, okay. You had, you know, you're anxious because you wear the mask. Well, make sure you don't have to wear it that long next time, or whatever. Instead of there's something, you know, underlying that's possibly triggering this kind of anxiety, because that's a big deal. A panic attack's a big deal.
It's a big deal. I was going to say one practical tip that we sometimes use in medicine is that kids sometimes don't necessarily want to talk about their own behaviors, feelings, emotions, but that you can ask about friends. Have you had a friend who's really struggling with depression and anxiety? What does that look like? How is that, you know, so sometimes that's kind of your hook to get in and to talk about it if it's something that they're not comfortable with. So just another trick for people to be able to use, a tool for people to be able to use.
Let's, Brandon, I'm going to now jump over to social media. Let's just talk a little bit about social media.
Teach us.
And pressure, and then how is it impacting relationships? And here we go. Here's tossing the ball to you here.
So, just generally, pre-COVID, right? Social media has been such a fantastic tool to allow the world to connect, right? And especially for those of us who, who are older and have lived lives and have, old friends that have moved across the country, or maybe we've moved, it's been a great way to reconnect with people. So as a tool in that way, fantastic, right? But the other side of it is, it just creates such an artificial, how I'm treated online is how people actually think of me in person, right? And how many interactions I get, whether it's likes or comments or whatever, is how I should assign value to either the art that I've shared or the story that I've told or the experience that I've had, those types of things. And it has become a very strong competitor, if it hasn't won already in many circumstances, for real relationships, like in-person interaction. And then unfortunately we add the isolation of COVID, and now we're left with relying on electronic means of communication more than ever before. And I think it just exacerbates things. So it's refreshing every once in a while. You see someone post, a no makeup selfie, right? This is just a real me. I've had a really difficult day. The mom being honest about the difficulty she's had with her kids or something like that. And why is that so refreshing? It's because we are all overwhelmed with all the fake stuff. And so certainly that impacts how kids are viewing themselves, how they're motivated to behave in certain ways to capture attention or seek affirmation. And I think that really makes a lot of them vulnerable to exploitation in a lot of different ways, because there is such a desire to achieve those goals, whether those goals are a number of likes or the attention of particular people online. And that neediness, that emotional neediness is really evident to people who are out there looking to take advantage of vulnerable kids. And so it has been a problem. It continues to be a problem. And it's something that, from a parenting standpoint, I always just advise parents, we can't abandon the cyberspace to kids, right? We can't say, well, I don't understand that, that's new. As long as we have parental responsibility, it's our responsibility to know what's out there, what is going on this platform. And I first opened a Facebook account years ago, not because I was interested in joining Facebook, but because I realized my kids are going to want to be on Facebook pretty soon. I got to figure this out. And I was a criminal investigator at the time, investigating crimes on Facebook. So I understood how it worked on the back end, but I wasn't a user, right? I didn't interact with it all the time. So I had to make the intentional decision to create my own account and get online and interact with people and see what is this experience about. I beat my kids to it, right? Now, all those platforms have exploded. I can't beat my kid to every platform. That's not going to happen. But I do try to stay aware of what's out there, what are the risks. And certainly, I definitely reinforce standards that exist. So, in the U.S. especially, most platforms have an age 13 limit. Can't get on until you're 13. And so I never let my kids do that. It would have been nice at some point to be able to have a way to communicate with them online when they were younger than 13 while we were apart. But, I think that when we, again, back to the modeling issue, if we start to model that, the standard is this, the rules say one thing, but we're okay breaking the rules, I think that starts us down a bad path, a slippery slope.
I just have to ask a follow-up. Are there very practical ways to, where's the balance between actually putting parameters on and maybe you recommend certain filters? I mean, is it a filter thing? Is it I just think about families right now. Their kids are all online. I mean, most schools are online. Most people are working and they're just trying to do the best they can. A second grader, has the iPad, trying to work on school. What do you recommend? I mean, how do we do filters or do we not do filters? How do we how do we approach this?
So there's a lot of options. And I would start with as a parent, what's your level of comfort with technology? How capable are you, right? Because certainly there are off-the-shelf commercial solutions that we could all buy and they help. But the one thing that we can never do is rely on whatever the thing is to be a solution. We can't just say, okay, well, I bought the filter software, so I'm good, I don't have to worry about it anymore. No, you're a parent, we still need to supervise, right? We still need to know what our kids are doing. One of the frustrations I've seen is that certainly lots of different platforms, lots of different devices and operating systems have different settings and different capabilities and different vulnerabilities also. Certainly kids are very tech savvy, and I've seen kids find workarounds. And so we need to know what are those workarounds. And we need to be able to kind of calculate the risks and say, okay, I know that in allowing you to use this platform, there is a vulnerability there, but an open conversation, I'm going to acknowledge, I know there's a vulnerability. I expect that you're going to follow our rules, and I'm going to check, right? There has to be that follow-up on our authority. If we don't exercise our authority, we've ceded our authority. So as parents, if we're going to say, that phone is mine, and I have the right to look at it whenever I want, and then we never look at it, it doesn't matter that the phone is mine, right? We have to actually follow through. And I always tell my kids, and I encourage others, to explain that in a way of this is not to catch you doing something. This is to create a habit of awareness that I am going to exercise my parental authority and supervise you. And so that when you are tempted to engage in behavior that you shouldn't, or you are sent something that you shouldn't have, I want you to think in your mind, 10 seconds from now could be the time dad walks in the room and says, give me your phone, right? I want to beat him to it, right? I want to either not do that at all or go disclose the fact that somebody just sent this to me now, because I know if I don't do that and dad catches later on, then I'm going to end up having a consequence. I'm going to lose my phone or that type of thing. And so this is an area of parenting that just really takes a lot of work right now.
There's, I was just going to say, there's medically some recommendations around social media or just electronic use in general, and some of those things would be like there should be a docking station where devices are plugged in. That's not in a child's room.
Okay.
So they should never have access to it when they're alone in their room.
Yep.
Any social media, if your child is on social media, you need to have passwords to their account so that you can actually log in as them and look at all of that. The same for any device. Nothing's ever completely locked. There are some great online contracts that can be signed, and you could certainly look at one and then amend it for your family. Yep. And again, nothing's a failed proof, but creating that expectation and something that they've agreed to as well. Therefore, if there's violation of it, you've got evidence to say this is what we said was acceptable, you didn't do it.
Yes.
And then to hold accountable for it.
And in our family, we've certainly done those things, and I would joke with my kids and with others about how unfortunate they are. Their dad's the internet police.
Yes,
because for a time that is what I did.
Internet police.
But certainly with cell phones, we have from the very beginning, 10 years ago when we first gave one of our kids a cell phone, it came with a contract, and we explained it as I have to sign a contract when I get the phone from the phone company.
Yep.
You're going to sign a contract when you get it from me, and it includes things like, the phone is mine. I am issuing it to you for your use, and I can take it back for any reason at any time.
Yep.
This is a communication device, not your entertainment device. Right? If you want to play video games, save up your money and buy a video game system. I'm giving you the phone so that mom and dad can communicate with you.
Yes.
And therefore, use it for communication. Yeah. If you don't answer my calls, you don't respond to my text messages, we're going to have problems. Yeah. Those types of things. There are really great resources out there for sample contracts like that. Certainly, I am 100% in favor of not allowing kids to take phones into the room at night.
Yeah.
We've got a rule in our house and always have, no phones in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Because there's just such a normalcy now about going in the bathroom and taking a selfie in the mirror, right? And I don't know why people have to stand in front of the mirror and take a picture of themselves taking a picture. Why they don't just use the other camera on their phone, but that's something that happens, right?
Yeah.
And I know that many, many, many exploitive images of kids, nude images of kids, are taken in that manner, in a bathroom mirror. And a bathroom is a space of privacy in the house, right? And so in my mind, the phone doesn't need to go into the most private space in the house. Let's just set that standard now, so that later on, if the temptation is there or the request has been made to produce those images, you have to cross that other psychological barrier of not only do I have to agree to send the photo that I know I shouldn't send, but I have to agree to violate the rule that has been long-standing in my house to even get to the point where I could do that. And so that type of very proactive thinking is something I've always advocated for as a parent, especially if you've got young kids now. Now's the chance that you have to set some rules for your 6-year-old, anticipating what it's going to be like parenting the 16-year-old, right? And so, for example, when our kids were very young, we set a rule that said your bed is your own private space. Nobody ever gets on your bed, not even your siblings, not to play. Your friends come over. Your bed is just for you, and that's a hard and fast rule. Not because I think anything's going to happen with the 2 toddlers playing cards on the bed, but because when those toddlers are teenagers, I want them to know the rule has always been nobody's ever on my bed. And it's just become a normal condition for them. Instead of when they reach adolescence, the parents going, oh, we better change some rules because now we're concerned about different threats.
Yeah.
And the kids reacting to that with, why are you suddenly changing the rules on me? Don't you trust me? I haven't, did I get in trouble for something? And those are hard questions for a parent to answer when the reason they're changing the rules is about stuff they don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
Right? So the more long-term we can be thinking as parents, I think the better equipped we're going to be to deal with some of those challenges, whether it's social media or personal boundaries.
Yeah. So I can't remember if I asked this in my questions to you guys beforehand, but can we just talk about cell phones for a second? We have a 12-year-old daughter. She's going into 7th grade, and she is like raring to get a cell phone. So she does not have a cell phone. Let's just talk about cell phone age recommended, and also is there an entry phone, or do you just hand over an iPhone full data? I mean, how do you incrementally, what would be the wise way to introduce a cell phone, and what's the wise age? We joke with our kids, when you're 16, you need a phone because you'll be driving. Other than that, you're gonna be close to us. But that's not necessarily a real thing. It's just something that we tease them about because with responsibility and age, you earn these types of responsibilities. But what do you guys say?
There's a phone and I'm not remembering the name, so Google it, but it's Go Phone or Go Phone that was designed by a parent. It looks a lot like an iPhone, but just as you said, it is a communicative device and nothing else. So it's got sort of text and call, but you can limit the features on that, and you can take pictures, but can't even send pictures on the phone, and it doesn't have web access or social media. So again, if that's maybe a first introduction step, I like what you're saying. It's nice to have, because I don't want to talk about our kids as if they're all bad either.
No, exactly.
There's so many kids that honestly
Yep.
are fine. You could hand them an iPhone and they would be great with it.
Yep.
We should put boundaries on them for sure, but there are those kids that really don't need it, right? And so, again, kind of going back to our underlying theme of mindfulness and evaluating. I mean, I think from an age perspective, even you have to look at your life.
Yes.
Where you live, do they need the safety of having a phone if they're staying home alone?
Yeah.
Do you live in a neighborhood where there's a neighbor next door to help them? I mean, all those sorts of things are going to guide your choices as a parent.
Yeah.
My kids are still little, so right now I just feel like never.
Never.
They can never
I
have
know,
a phone.
I know.
That's what I want to protect them from it. But that isn't protecting them, because the reality is devices and social media and online presence, that is now a part of parenting.
Yep.
We need to prepare them to be adults and to not get themselves in such bad trouble that they can't recover from because they've never been exposed to online.
Yep.
And so I think that's now an important category of parenting and our responsibility to prepare them for the world. If that's what we think we're doing as parents, that's part of it now.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Ready or not, whether we want it to be
I
or
know.
not. I'm not ready.
I might actually say no, but it's like should be yes. Yeah, lean in.
Maybe.
Exactly.
Maybe, depending on the
I'm
child.
familiar with the phone that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I think it's fantastic. But from my perspective, recognizing that people are going to come at this from all different types of, technical capabilities, financial situations, all that type of thing. I just want to encourage people and say there are ways to make the everyday phone, that each of us is using, or a cheap phone that you can buy online used. There are ways to adjust the settings and lock those down. It takes some time to research that, but as parents, we need to do our homework.
Yep.
Get online. If you buy the
Is
phone.
YouTube? Do you YouTube that? Like
you-
you said,
you
turn the
could.
web browser off, and I was like, who knew? I didn't know you could do that.
So you could. I mean, I think you could
I'd have
learn
to ask
do
my
just
kids.
about. You can learn to do anything on YouTube almost, but certainly I would say. We need to take responsibility for that and seek out that information. There are lots of great resources, and just a simple web search is a great place to start.
Yeah. So let's talk about building a lasting faith in our kids. A question that someone asked me once was, do you force your kids to go to youth group? Do you force them to do a quiet time? Or do you just model it and you hope for the best? And how much do you push and how much do you let go? So Cindy, why don't you get us kicked off, and if anyone else wants to add to that.
So we provided them a Bible.
Yes.
But did we make them read it? We did not make them read it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, when they were little and I was doing the comparison game with what do other families do, and they're doing devotionals and they're doing scripture memorization and
they're at BSF.
And they're at, right.
And they're at everything.
Exactly.
We just went to sports and
Right, exactly. Yes, we were not doing the Sabbath on the Sabbath. We were doing it a little bit different. And so a lot of guilt around that. And then what really honestly just completely freed me from all of that was, if you're familiar with Barna Research, they're a pretty legit company for doing good research. And I read about how, if you really want your children to have their faith become their own as they go into adulthood, you got to live it out. You got to live it out. You got to be what you want your kids to be. And I was like, whoa, okay, I think we can do this, not perfectly, right? But be who you want them to be, but, who are you at home? Who are you when you're at church? Who are you in the workplace, right? And realizing that being credible to talking about values, right? If I value honesty, then I need to demonstrate it. So how is that demonstrated? And so if I got my kids with me and I go to the grocery store and I realize I got that case of water and I forgot to let the cashier know and I'm out at the car, right? Oh shoot, there's my case of water. So I have a choice. I can throw it in the back of my car and my kids will never know the difference. right? Or I can, come on, you guys, we got to go back in the store. Mom didn't pay for this water, right? That's where I'm demonstrating whether or not honesty is important to me. And so I think if we apply that to our faith, right? We say, right, that God is important, relationship with Jesus is important, but what were my kids seeing? Right? Were they just seeing ministry? Were they just seeing, oh, mom is so nice to those kids at church, and then at home she's like not so nice. So all of that, right? Yeah. So not perfectly, and man, if I apologize more times than I can count to my kids for attitudes and behaviors, and especially my daughter, she'd wake up to many a text message. So sorry about how I acted last night, not so nice, so sorry about that. So again, modeling, what do I want kids that can say they're sorry? Do I want kids to be able to forgive others? Do I want, again, those values of honesty and, dependability, but do I really want kids to love Jesus? And not just be a Christian, right? But be a follower, go after him. And do I want them to eventually, if God's plan is for them to marry people who go after Jesus. Yeah. And so in all that, right, I think that it comes down to, living out what you believe to be, true for a walk with Jesus Christ, and modeling that. And then, and prayer. Oh man, so much prayer. It's so powerful. Praying with your spouse. I think that's really, really important. I'm learning, I don't know about Lisa, but as I work with couples, even couples that have been doing ministry for years, and I'll ask the question, how often do you pray together? And in the last couple of months, I've had at least 3 or 4 say, wait, pray together? Never. And so as gently as I can, try to help them understand, wow, for your family, that is really going to be the number one thing you can do. Is to pray together and let your kids see you praying together. It softens your heart towards each other. It softens your heart towards others. And it allows the Holy Spirit to really do the work of the Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah. Praying together as a couple, I think, is one of the most intimate things that we can do, to the point that I have for a long time advised young adults who are dating not to pray with each other.
That's what I said
because
to my kids.
I think it can really fuel intimacy that it would be inappropriate in that circumstance. So that's a great thing to point out. The other thing that I would just ask everybody to remember is that faith is not formulaic, right? There is no special combination of things that we as parents can do that will guarantee our kids, right? Yeah, it's not like that. And for those of us who have more than one kid in the house, right? We can see our kids have different personalities. Yeah. They have different sinful tendencies. They have different strengths. And so we may tend to have kind of an overarching, this is the way we parent, with some consistency, even though we're going to have to try and fine tune that per kid. But then as our kids grow, we may end up seeing different results. Yeah. And we have to be gentle with ourselves as well. I can definitely say that as I have aged, and I certainly went through that period of time where I realized that I know much less about parenting than I thought I did. And I've had to repent of some attitudes I had about parenting, or even looking at others, and the kids that those people raised.
Have you seen the meme that says, I was such a good parent to my theoretical children? Yes, right. And isn't it so true? Yeah. I knew exactly what I was doing before I actually had real people as children.
Yeah. So there's, it's a powerful thing to be humbled like that. But then I think what we end up with, which is what the research is showing, the best thing we can do is just live it out. Yeah. Right? Certainly be explicit about it, right? We're not hiding our faith at all. But, so let's do all those things. Let's take our kids to church, and let's provide the Bible. But then let's let them see that we prioritize that time of worship. Or, for our family, when we served overseas for 3 years, we moved overseas with 4 teenagers. I don't recommend it, right? It was a brutal experience for us, and we served for 3 years and we came back. But what my wife and I really were very strongly in agreement about was we were modeling obedience. The call came, it was so clear, and so we explicitly told the kids, this is why we're going. No, I don't want to go, and Mom doesn't want to go, and we know you don't want to go, but we're going because God has clearly called us to do this. And so if you get nothing else out of this experience, just recognize Mom and Dad are showing you what it's like to be obedient. And I expect that the experience was much better than that. But there were some really difficult times involved in that. But I think modeling is really the best that any of us can do.
Do you guys have any ages or specific things as a rite of passage for kids, maybe tied to puberty, but maybe not, but maybe adulthood? And so any suggestions for any rites of passage?
Sure. I think it starts when they're little. So whether, those infant dedications, it's like they see the pictures later when they're older. We brought the family around you and we prayed for you, and our church promised to support Dad and I in raising you because we don't have all the answers. And so I think rites of passage are important. And I think one of the things that my husband did in our family, because we have sons, is he took them away for a weekend when I think they were either 10 and 12 or 11 and 13, I can't remember exactly, and talked to them about, the years ahead of them, and that and we tried to have small conversations all the way through, so that wasn't so weird, right?
Totally. Like,
you start when they're little, and you call the parts by the real names, and you do all that stuff, and then but when they before they're dating, right, before they're 16, when they're 12, and when they're way before they start dating, you start talking about what that might look like, and what we believe about their health and their safety and their emotional safety and their spiritual, health as you think about going into those years. So I think, and affirming, I think part of that too was just affirming, like, here's the strengths that I see in you, and naming those, and here's the hopes that I have for you, and I know that God's gifted you, and here's the ways that I see. And I think taking those intentional moments for both us, and I think sometimes it's really helpful to have extended family, write a note, and we as parents have to facilitate that. Not every grandparent, thinks of that at an important birthday, 12 or 13. We could say, this is just kind of a special year. He's becoming a teenager, or she's becoming a teenager, and we would love for you to just express to our child in a couple of sentences the strengths that you see in them, or the good qualities, just to reinforce that our value isn't just coming from social media and the likes we get there. And so I think, I think it's going to be different for every family, and culturally it can be different. But I think taking those moments and maximizing, our communication of love and hope and acceptance, and I see you and I value you kind of messages, I think those moments are important.
Oh, definitely.
One of the things, this isn't necessarily a rite of passage, but one of the things I felt like my parents did with myself and my sister so well was just to talk about the importance of having other trusted people having a voice in our life. And so I think that's another piece of the puzzle. And actually developmentally, if you look at teenagers, right, in some of those pivotal years when you need that rite of passage, but that's also a time developmentally where they're often pulling away from family and developing their own identity. And so I think creating those opportunities and developing those relationships, whether it's extended family or close friends or people within the church or wherever that be, to have other people other adults that they can look to besides just their parents for some of those really key conversations. So I think facilitating those relationships is really important as well.
I just think we need to have those conversations in that culture in our family of, with privileges come responsibilities, and when you're showing me you're responsible, then you will gain this privilege, you'll have earned it. And so I think that's not really a rite of passage necessarily, but it's
open communication.
Open communication, and it's building those milestones around what our kids are ready for individually, not this is the family rule forever and always.
No, that's a great point.
We say that all the time in our family. We meet individual needs in this family, and it doesn't look the same for all of you because you aren't all the same people. And our stage of life is not the same. I'm a youngest child. My sisters grew up always saying, well, she got that when we didn't. And honestly, it's partially because my parents were older, tireder, and had a little more money. And so I did get things that my big sisters didn't. Just to be fair, from the outside, I definitely did. But again, lives are different.
So can you guys talk real quick, and I don't know, Dr. Bailey, if you want to take this on, but can you talk about juggling work and home? Like, how do you juggle? I mean, you work full time, right? Or almost full time, or, I mean, you work a lot.
Yes.
And your husband works a lot,
Yes.
and your kids work a lot of energy out of you. So how do you work it all? How do you juggle it all?
Let's go back to my anxiety comment. I think it is number one, realizing that you probably can't juggle it all, and you have to understand that.
Yeah.
And therefore you have to look what is actually doable. And so, I mean, like, I've had patients say to me, like, oh, you have so much energy. And I'm like, I sometimes lay on the floor in my office at the end of the day because I'm so tired. And also, like a social media comment, don't judge me when I'm at work and I've like showered and put on makeup and an outfit. I mean, my favorite thing is to run into people around town and they give me this look like, I know you, but who are you? And I'm like, oh, the 3 screaming toddlers in the van doesn't give the same doctor vibe, right? So, and I'm very fortunate. I have help. I mean, I have a family that's in town that I rely on heavily.
Yep.
I have somebody that cleans my house.
Yep.
Somebody that mows my lawn.
Yep.
So I think, you know, number one, recognizing that you really can't do it all. So you have to focus in. Go back to the very beginning to our mission statements.
Yep.
What's important, what's of value, what has lifelong impact, and you have to focus in on that, recognizing that some other stuff is gonna have to go.
Yeah.
I think it's also being thoughtful. Okay, so in medicine, we'll talk about pain. There's 2 types of pain. There's acute pain, you touch a stove and it hurts and that makes you put your hand back. It's purposeful pain.
Yeah.
There's also chronic pain. This is the back pain that we all get, right? That for whatever reason, things are firing the way they shouldn't be. It doesn't serve a purpose, that pain, it's just there.
Yeah.
I think of sort of the work-life balance and the guilt sometimes of being a working mom in the same way. Where is that guilt appropriate? Where is it telling me that there's something off that doesn't align with who I want to be as a mom or as a doctor or as a colleague? Where is that guilt supposed to drive me to make changes in my life? And where is that guilt just useless? Where is that guilt coming from me comparing myself to everybody else and seeing my own weaknesses and seeing my own faults? I've had in the last year really recognize that my internal monologue is pretty darn negative. And I actually see where the Lord has put such beautiful, wonderful, affirming people in my life, I think, to combat that. But recognizing that was huge in my own world. And again, I think kind of coming back to that point of recognizing like I can't do it all and having to be honest about that. Right? It'd be easy for me. I'm sitting here and my kids are at home right now. And there's a part of me that's like, oh my gosh, is that the right thing? Is that the right choice? Should I do that? Should I do that? And sometimes I just have to be like, Suzanne, stop. I feel like this is the right choice for now. Hopefully I'm modeling my faith in action to my children and we'll talk to them about what I'm doing. And there is a pro and a con. And when I go home, I will need to be 100% fully engaged with them because I've been gone for 2 hours. And so, I think just thinking about that from the work-life balance, you cannot do it all. Something is gonna fail and that's okay. And then recognizing where you need to make transitions versus where you need to let that, like you need to cage that emotion, take it captive, pray your way through it, and make it actively stop talking to you.
And I'll tack on to that because I'm past that now, and I went through all of that, and the balancing and learning boundaries was really helpful for me. I had a mentor who taught me about, you don't have to take a phone call from someone at church at 7 o'clock at night, right? You don't have to do that.
Totally.
So I learned some really great boundaries, but also realizing, and maybe Lisa can speak to this too, like it's a season. It's a season. These are seasons. Right, and so what I said no to 12 years ago, 15 years ago, I can say a big yes to now, right? I can do those things that, wow, that just isn't gonna work with where we're at in our season of parenting. But now, it's very different. And so as an encouragement to moms in the thick of it, right, and dads in the thick of it, right, it's a season. And so saying no now doesn't mean that it's a no forever. Right? And to, and like you said earlier, back an hour and a half ago, right, there's so much good. There's so much good, but no has to become a part of the vocabulary. Otherwise you'll just be exhausted, and you'll be exhausted with the stuff you have to do, let alone adding in the stuff that God maybe isn't really needing you to do for him.
I think with little kids, you recognize that you have to build a margin, because right when you've pushed yourself to the edge of what you're going to handle is when the temper tantrum's going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you are not mindful of that and don't build that into your life, it's going to be ugly. I mean, we've all been there. Those are the things we text to apologize for afterwards,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because we pushed ourselves to the edge, and it turns out our children are real people who also have equally real lives and emotions and bad moments.
Yep.
And being prepared for that is I think vitally important.
Right, and I think, just wanting to talk about the North
Star,
Star.
yeah.
Like, I just want my kids to want to hang out with me as adults.
Yeah.
I love that they want to be with me, and that, even though my daughter's married, I'm hearing from them a lot, and my son-in-law will be like, hey, we miss you, and I'm so grateful for that, like, because when it all comes down to it, it's about relationship.
Yep.
It's about relationship.
Yep.
Right? And are we doing the things that are gonna, cause our kids later on down the road to want to come home and want to FaceTime and have those conversations, so that we can still be a significant part of their life.
Well, thanks, you guys. That kind of wraps up our time, and I love your perspective. Thank you for taking the time and sharing and being honest with your story. And I just am so grateful for you, and I'm so thankful for the time and the opportunity we've had around this dialogue around relationships and parenting. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today, man. I was so blessed by these conversations, this open dialogue, and this realness from each of them with their stories and how they've woven together. And I hope you were blessed by this time as well. I hope that it's brought some good things to mind. I know for me, it's brought some really practical applications, and I hope it does for you as well. So thank you for joining on this session, and we look forward to more conversations around this.